Hey everyone, this is Pallavi, and today I'm going to show the 20th game of the book Logical Chess Move by Move by Irving Chernev. This game was played between Rubinstein and Salwe in Lodz in 1908. Rubinstein is considered to be one of the strongest players to never win the World Championship. In 1914, a match was agreed upon between world champion Emanuel Lasker and Rubinstein. Unfortunately, this event never took place because of World War I. Let's see the game between him and Salwe. Let's start. So white played d4. The opening was Queen's Gambit declined. Occupies the center and exerts pressure in the center with the pawn, which is protected by the queen, also making way for the bishop to come out. Black played d5. Equalizes the pressure in the center, prevents white from playing e4. Now white played c4 to induce black to surrender the center by offering a pawn. Also to exchange pawns if black does not, and the open and to open the c file for his rooks. Now black played e6. Black supports the d pawn with another pawn. If white captures with c takes d5, then black can recapture with another pawn and maintain a pawn in the center. White played knight to c3, develops towards the center and strikes at d pawn, controls the e4 square. Black played c5, attacks the central d4 pawn and enables black to post his b8 knight to c6 or open up the c file to control it with rook. Now white played c takes d5. The best way to keep the initiative, this exchange aims to saddle black with an isolated d pawn. Black captured e takes d5. Safest recapture. Has black played c takes d4, then queen takes d4, knight to c6 attacking the queen, and then queen to d1, and then pawn takes pawn on d5, and then queen takes d5. Leaves white with an extra pawn. So after c takes d5, black captured e takes d5. White played knight f3, developing the other knight towards the center. Now all the four central squares are under c3 and f3 knights surveillance. Black played knight f6. Black too develops his knight towards the center, supports the d5 pawn and controls the e5 square. It makes little difference whether black plays this or knight to c6. So after knight f6, white played a good move. White played g3. With this move, white intends to fianchetto his f1 bishop and increase pressure on d5. Also possible is, instead of g3, also possible is e3 or bishop f4 or even aggressive bishop to g5. So after g3, black played knight to c6, developing towards the center, controls the e5 square and puts pressure on the d4 pawn. White played bishop g2, commanding the long diagonal and will add pressure on the d5 pawn. For the moment, the knight is obstructing its path, but a knight can readily leap aside. Now black played c takes d4. Black exchanges to give his pieces more scope, especially the f8 bishop. Bishop's diagonal is now open, but this is not without its dangers. Open lines favor the player whose development is superior, and in this case it is white. Somewhat better is the quiet bishop e7, developing a piece, or bishop g4, putting more pressure on the d4 pawn by striking at one of its defenders. So after c takes d4, now white played knight takes d4. The recapture leaves black with an isolated d pawn and in the center of the board. But both white and black has advantages and disadvantages, such as black has in his favor increased mobility for his pieces, possible outpost for his pieces at e4 and c4, which are supported by the d5 pawn, and open files for his major pieces. The E file and the C file is like an open file for the other pieces. Now, white has advantages like he can permanently place a piece on d4 and keep black busy warding off threats to the pawn. The fact that the d5 pawn needs constant care, white can switch the attack to another section of the board. Black must not only prepare to fight back there, but also keep in close touch with the weak pawn. So here black played queen to b6, urging white to exchange knights or defend it by e3, blocking the path of its c1 bishop. White played knight takes c6. A good move, he relieves black of the isolated pawn, but in return fixes him with other weaknesses. From now on, white will forget about d5 square and turn his attention to dominating d4 and c5 completely. By anchoring pieces on these squares, he can prevent black from advancing his d pawn or his c pawn, for which black's pieces will be shut in behind these pawns. So after knight takes c6, black played b takes c6. Only move, had black played queen takes c6, then knight takes d5, loses a pawn immediately. So after b takes c6, now white played castle, king safety before starting any kind of attack. Black played bishop e7, developing the bishop and making way for castle. White played knight a4, a good move, attacking the queen, but the main motive here is to get control of the c5 square so that a white piece may settle itself securely there. Now, after this, black played queen to b5. The queen stays in the neighborhood to help ward off the invaders. White played bishop e3. One would expect to develop the bishop either from f4 or g5. But from e3, the idea is to control the c5 square and confine his opponent's pieces to a small area and drive them back step by step. Now, black played castle. Well, pushing the pawn at once is immature or premature, as after c5, white can play bishop takes d5, and or knight c3, then queen c6, then knight takes d5, or bishop takes d5. It's a skewer. And after c5, bishop cross d5, and then knight takes d5, queen takes d5, queen takes e4, and queen takes a8 wins an exchange. So after castle, white played rook to c1. White seizes the half open c file, brings more pressure to the c6 pawn, and prepares to post a piece on c5. Black played bishop to g4, develops the bishop with an attack on the e2 pawn with two pieces, the bishop and the queen. White played f3, a temporary shut-in of the g2 bishop. And as for the weaknesses of the kingside pawns, it is of no consequence if black cannot exploit it. Had white played rook e1 instead of f3, then the rook's development is stretched. If white had played knight to c3, then queen takes b2, wins a pawn. If white had played rook to c2, supporting the e2 pawn, then queen takes a4, wins black a piece. So white played f3, attacking the g4 bishop. Black played bishop e6. The bishop finds the right square, but it is too late. White played bishop to c5. And white places a piece where it will mobilize black's pawns and restrict the movement of his pieces. Now after this, black played rook f e8. Black must protect his bishop, or else if he plays bishop takes c5, then rook takes c5, replaces the blockader with another piece and gains a tempo by attack on the queen. So after rook f e8, now white played rook f2, a very fine move. After white plays e3, the rook can switch over to c2 to help exploit the c file, of course after defending the a4 knight. It also vacates the f1 square for the bishop, which can occupy a more useful diagonal. So after rook f2, now black played knight to d7. Black attacks the bishop a third time with the hope of forcing it to retreat. Now white played bishop takes e7. The bishop does not withdraw, as that lets black get in the thrust c5, breaking the bind on his position, nor does white support the bishop by b4. The kind of move many players would make instantly. The consequence would be bishop takes c5, forcing the pawn to recapture with b takes c5, since knight takes c5 allows queen takes b4, or rook takes c5 causes the exchange knight takes c5. So after b takes c5, the pawn is not only immobilized and useless but also closes the file to white's pieces, the c file. So after bishop takes e7, now white played, black played rook takes e7, and then white played queen to d4. A good move, excellent centralization of the queen. The queen guards the knight and keeps eye on the b2 pawn as well as keeps black from advancing his c pawn. Now black played rook e8. This rook retreats to help defend the c file against white's attack, since a move by the 8 rook costs a pawn. So after this, white played bishop to f1, planning to activate his bishop. Black played rook ec8, reviving the possibility of playing c5. White played e3, a good move. A subtle move that attacks the queen, opens the diagonal of the bishop, and line for the f2 rook. Now black played queen b7, retreats as well as keeps his c-pawn supported. Had black played c5, then rook takes c5, gains the pawn, as black cannot recapture the rook, as his queen is still under attack by the bishop. So after queen b7, now white played knight to c5. The knight settles down on c5 and barricades black's position. Now black played knight takes c5. Black removes the blockader not only to get rid of it but also on the theory that exchanges help relieve a cramped position. White played rook takes c5, recaptures as well as works as a blockader, and since the rook is on a dark square, black cannot attack with his bishop to get rid of. Now black played rook to c7. Black cannot counterattack. All he can do is sit tight and await events. But as Stockfish says, black could have played a5, controlling the b4 square and making way for rook a6 and activate the a8 rook. So after rook c7, now white played rook fc2, doubling the rooks, making them more strong and pressurizing the c6 pawn. Queen b6. Black sticks to non-committal moves until his opponent declares himself a threatening gesture. Now white played b4, a good move. White's threat is b5, striking a third time at the immobilized c-pawn. Black played a6. Black must not allow the advance of the b4 pawn. Now white played rook a5. Good move, shifting the attack as to keep black occupied, guarding all the weak points. The new target is a6. Black played rook b8. Black protects his queen as it was attacked by the white queen. Had black played queen takes d4, then pawn takes queen, bishop to c8, supporting the a6 pawn, but then rook takes d5 as the c7 pawn is pinned and is also threatening rook d8 checkmate. And had black played queen to b7, then queen to c5, followed by a4 and then b5, attacking the a6 and c6, a breakthrough. So after rook b8 supporting the queen, white played a3, protecting the valuable b pawn before proceeding with any kind of attack. Now black played rook to a7. Black saves the a pawn which was under attack, double attack, but loses a different pawn. which is rook takes c6. A good move. The cause of black's troubles, the c pawn, now falls. Then black played queen takes c6. If black played queen to b7, then rook a takes a6 and wins another pawn. So queen takes c6 and now white captured queen takes a7. The rook is under attack. Black played rook a8. Rescues the pawn as rook takes a6 would lead to rook takes a7, rook takes c6, rook takes a3, nets black a pawn in return. So after rook a8, white played queen to c5. Again taking possession of the c file and the key square, the c5 square, this time with the queen. Now black played queen to b7. Black avoids exchange of queens since queen takes c5 would lead to rook takes c5, and let's say the king moves to f8 to bring his king out. Then rook a5, black can save the a pawn only by abandoning the d pawn. If black plays bishop c8, then rook takes d5. So after queen b7, now white played king f2, moving the king closer to the center for the endgame in the event that the queens are exchanged. Now black played h5. Black is trying to attack from the king side, but this does not intimidate white or divert him from his purpose of effecting a decision on the queen side. Now white played bishop to e2. White shelters the king from any annoying checks that might ensue once the position is opened up. Now black played g6. Black's pieces are tied down to the defense of the two isolated pawns. So he makes a waiting move with a pawn. Now white played queen to d6, attacks the a6 pawn again. After this, black played queen to c8. Black cannot guard all his pawns, so he deserts the a pawn to try to get at white's king via the open c file. So now white played rook to c5. It is more important to retain control of the c file and to keep black's pieces off it than to pick up stray pawns. So here black played queen to b7. There wasn't white choice of squares to flee. Now white played h4. This immobilizes black's kingside pawns and also guards against any surprise attack on that wing. Now black played a5. Black tries to open for his queen by main force. Now white played rook to c7. White is now in full control of strategically important areas such as the c file, the c5 square, the d file, the 6th rank and the 7th rank as well. Now black played queen to b8, the only hiding place. White played b5. Another good move, a new source of trouble. White has a passed pawn moving up the board. Now black played a4 gives his rook more room. White played b6, threatening to continue with the pawn advance. Now black played rook a5. The rook accomplishes nothing here, but there is no real defense. Now white played b7 and black resigned. Since black cannot defend, as if black plays king to g7, then rook takes f7 check, wins the queen. If black plays queen to e8, then queen to b6, threatening to promote the pawn and also attacking the rook. If black plays queen to a7, then queen d8 check, king g7 and b8 equals to queen. And if black plays rook to a7, then rook c8 check and wins. So after b7, black resigned because of all these threats. So with this game, we learned some principles such as occupy the center with pawns, develop your pieces towards the center, try developing your pieces as quickly as possible, castle as early as possible, open lines favor the player whose development is superior, rooks belong on open files or on files likely to be opened. Place your rooks on 7th rank or 2nd rank for black whenever possible, and exchanges help relieve a cramped position. So I hope you learned something from this game as well. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in my next video. Thank you. Bye.